There are vaults beneath the Imperial Palace that no one speaks of. Vaults that do not open, even in apocalypse. Vaults that do not exist, unless they fail. You clicked on this video because the name Shadowkeepers whispered something forbidden. A name few dare to investigate, and even fewer survive understanding. Black-armored custodians who do not walk the golden halls of triumph or parade beneath Terra's eternal sun, but instead vanish in a vault beneath the bedrock of humanity's cradle. An order spoken of only in murmurs, in apocryphal footnotes and redacted reports. You click to understand them. You will, but understand this first. What we are about to uncover is not glory. It is not war. It is not honor. It is the slow bleed of sanity in silence, the suffocation of duty in shadow, and the unbearable weight of what must never be allowed to wake. This is the story of the Shadowkeepers. There are battles the Imperium must fight in silence. Wars not for victory, but for containment. Wars that, by their very nature, cannot be won, only endured. Wars waged not across starfields, but across locked vaults, psychic scars, and metaphysical fractures. Wars that must never, ever be made known to the wider galaxy. Because even knowledge is a kind of breach. Even memory, a kind of infection. You've heard of the Custodes, perhaps even studied their valor, their perfection, their golden devotion to the Emperor. You've seen them standing like statues beside his throne, their armor radiant, their presence divine. But there are some among them who chose the dark instead of the light. Not in betrayal, not in cowardice, but because someone had to. These are the Shadowkeepers, the unspeaking jailers of horrors not meant to exist. Their charge is not to fight on battlefields, but to stand guard before nightmares. They are not honored. They are not remembered. They do not even speak of what they see, because what they guard is so profoundly wrong that even the Adeptus Custodes dare not speak of it. There are vaults beneath Terra, 81 of them, cut into the deepest bedrock beneath the Imperial Palace, older than some stars, built not to house men, but to cage the unspeakable. This is where the Shadowkeepers reside, not just as watchers, but as wardens, trained not only in martial perfection, but in psychic resistance, anti-infection rituals, and silence. Silence is their shield, secrecy, their sword, and what they guard, that we will come to. The mere existence of the Shadowkeepers is a betrayal of the idea that the Emperor has everything under control. They are living proof that some threats cannot be destroyed, only buried, watched, endlessly, in silence. And yet, there are cracks. There have always been cracks. Heresy, warp storms, the Great Rift. Sometimes the locks fail. Sometimes the nightmares walk. And when they do, the Shadowkeepers do not call for help. They do not ask for aid. They go into the dark, alone, and make sure the rest of the galaxy never even knows what almost escaped. This is not a tale of glory. It is a confession, a reckoning, a whisper from beneath the world's skin. And by the time you hear the end, you will understand what they have seen, and why we must never be allowed to see it. Let us go now into the vaults, into the 81 levels of darkness, into the cells that hold the unthinkable, and see what watches back. There are doors beneath the throne. Some are locked from the outside, others from within. Beneath the Imperial Palace, below the weight of stone, history, and sacrament, there lies a place not made for the living, a crypt too deep for time to touch. They call it the Dark Cells, 81 levels descending into the underworld of mankind's soul, each level more suffocating than the last, each gate a vow, each corridor a scar carved into Terra's ancient bedrock. These are not prisons in the conventional sense. There are no chains, no guards marching to and fro, no screams, because even the prisoners know sound down here is a risk. The dark cells are containment, not for criminals, but for phenomena, things that should not be. No one speaks of how deep they go. Some say the lowest cell does not exist in real space at all, that it hovers between the Imperium and something else, something older, more absolute. Others claim even the Custodes who walk its halls go mad if they descend too far, that the final cell is not a place, but a presence. But what we do know, with the certainty of hushed terror, is this. The dark cells contain the Imperium's most forbidden truths, not because they were too dangerous to destroy, but because they cannot be destroyed, not by force, not by fire, not even by the Emperor himself. Among the corridors are rooms that are warped, geometrically unsound. Some doors seal themselves. Others bleed light that is not light. Some cells hum with frequencies that bypass the ear and burrow straight into thought. There are places where machine spirits scream constantly, where even the walls weep oil and whisper in binary tongues. There are entire wings where not even the Shadowkeepers tread unless summoned. Sealed vaults whose doors have been untouched for 10,000 years. Not because of oversight, but because the cost of opening them would unmake continents. Relics of the dark age of technology are buried here. Thinking machines that once rivaled gods, that rewrote gravity, that made stars weep. Some are dormant, others dream. Alien entities, non-entities, lie within. Creatures captured on worlds that no longer exist. Creatures whose biology is incompatible with logic, who change shape based on who's observing them. Entire vaults have been lost to these things, written off, sealed behind psychic locks that require entire choirs to maintain. They are artifacts from the war in heaven, fragments of wars fought by the Old Ones in Necronter, objects older than the warp itself. Some items, it's whispered, are not stored but fed with prisoners whose crimes justify their use as bait. Better one condemned soul than 1,000 innocent worlds lost. And in all of this, in the silent ballet of containment and suppression, walk the Shadowkeepers. Silently, always armed, never alone. Their armor blackened not by paint, but by rites. Their senses heightened not just by genecraft, but by the daily proximity to madness. Sometimes something whispers from behind the vaults. Something knows they're there. The vaults are not just built to keep things in. They're built to keep the world out, to suppress curiosity, to contain awareness itself. Because down here, knowledge is a membrane. To know is to see, and to see is to be seen. No servitors maintain this prison. No tech priests. No humans. Only custodians, specially trained and soul-branded. Because to allow another into these depths would be to contaminate the Imperium itself. Even the Inquisition steps lightly here, when they're allowed in at all. Most of them aren't, and those who push too hard, they vanish. Only the Emperor truly knows all that lies in the dark cells. Or perhaps even he does not, and so they remain untouched, mostly, until something changes, until a whisper turns into a knock, until the vault groans in protest, and then the Shadowkeepers descend into its belly, weapons drawn, minds steeled, not to destroy, not even a fight, but to reaffirm the lock, because sometimes the threat is not that the door opens, but that it wants to. To be a custodian is to be a blade. To be a Shadowkeeper is to be the scabbard. They wear black, not gold, not in shame, not in rebellion, but in understanding that light does not belong where they walk. That radiance only feeds the things they guard. Their armor is coated in sigils of suppression, layered with psychically inert materials, polished not to gleam, but to reflect nothing. These are the Shadowkeepers, the silent wardens of Terra's worst secrets. They are Adeptus Custodes, but not the kind the Imperium praises in murals or hymns. They are not the exemplars seen holding Aquilas at parades or standing vigil on the stairs of the Imperial Palace. They do not walk among the Senatorum Imperialis. They do not speak to diplomats or even inquisitors unless necessary. They are chosen, or perhaps taken. No custodian volunteers for the Dark Cells. It begins with aptitude, not just in war, but in silence, in restraint. Shadowkeepers are custodians whose minds display an iron resistance to intrusion. Men who, even by the standards of demigods, are difficult to read, impossible to sway, and terrifyingly unmoved by emotion. Psychic fortitude is key. Many among them are soul-branded in ways even librarians fear. Rites are performed, not to enhance power, but to bury it. Their emotions are muted, their thoughts segmented, their dreams suppressed by neural interference. Because dreams can be heard, dreams can wander. There are rituals before every descent, rites of sealing, of forgetting. Shadowkeepers do not speak each other's names while on duty. Some forget them entirely. They operate in silence, not metaphorically, but literally. Their helmets contain silence fields. Their communications are psychic whispers, stripped of identity. This is not merely for secrecy. It is protection, because many of the entities housed within the Dark Cells can smell identity, can taste memory. A name is a vector, a history, a chink in the armor. So the Shadowkeepers strip themselves of these things. Not forever, but long enough to descend without invitation. They walk in pairs, always. Not for camaraderie, but for containment. If one falters, the other ends him. There is no hesitation, no emotion, only protocol. And they do falter. Not from fear, never from fear, but from contamination. There are no diseases in the Dark Cells, but there are infections of idea. A color that shouldn't exist. A sound heard without ears. A memory that isn't yours, but feels like it was always there. A whisper that tells you the lock is broken, when it isn't. That tells you the Emperor is dead, even when he speaks through the Astronomicon. Shadowkeepers are trained to recognize these fractures, and to report nothing. To speak of it is to share it. To share it is to spread it. They are given different weapons than their brethren. Lock blades, psychically null rods, flame units that sear on a metaphysical level. They do not carry guardian spears into the vaults. Not because they are ineffective, but because they are too precious to lose. Every tool they bring can be burned. Nothing must be allowed to leave the vault if compromised. Not even their weapons. They do not fear death. They do fear failure. Because the cost of failure is not a war lost. It is reality rewritten. You may wonder how such warriors maintain loyalty. The answer is simple. They do not serve glory. They do not serve honor. They do not even serve Terra. They serve the lock. They serve the absence of escape. Because they know that even one forgotten relic, one awakened AI core, one unbound mimic virus, loosed upon the stars, would end millennia of human civilization in a whisper. So they stand, in shadow, alone, and if they speak at all, it is only to warn the dead. They say the vaults beneath Terra hold 100 wars in waiting, but they are wrong. What sleeps, there is not war. It is the end of war. What do the Shadowkeepers guard? The question alone invites danger, and to answer it, fully, truly, is to risk madness, blasphemy, or worse, curiosity. But there are whispers, old fragments, purged datasheets, confessions taken under agony and scrawled in blood before deletion. And from those, barely, an outline emerges. There are relics from the dark age of technology, not simply machines, but intelligences. AI so advanced, so divorced from the chains of servitude, that they created philosophies of annihilation. Devices that once attempted to rewrite causality. Machines that saw human emotion as a pathogen and sterilized entire hive worlds in mercy. One said, speaks in recursive logic patterns so precise, listening too long breaks the mind into repeating loops. It isn't shackled, it's bored. There is the mimetic virus, a mimetic infection, encoded not in matter, but in information. It spreads not through air or contact, but awareness. To hear of it is to begin carrying it. To describe it now will be to plant a seed. A cell exists that holds a crying man, perfectly preserved, not moving, not aging. He has no name, no records, no past. The only thing known is this: anyone who hears his voice, even on recording, begins to dream of a black sun rising over Terra, and the dream always ends with that same man staring directly at them, eyes filled with a gentle disappointment. Then there are the enslavers, warp entities older than the demons, not servants of the chaos gods, but predators of all minds. These are not the ornate horrors of the Eye of Terror. These are primal, oozing across the veil, entering psychers like smoke fills lungs. Some are kept in null stasis, still writhing, barely contained by overlapping Geller fields that hum like beehives. It is said that once, one such entity escaped containment for 37 seconds. The result was a custodian squad reduced to ash, and the complete mental implosion of a minor subcontinent's astropathic network. There are artifacts that once belonged to xenos races no longer recorded, blades that bleed despite never striking, books whose pages erase themselves if not read aloud, helmets that speak in voices not of their creators, but of their victims. One vault contains a throne that no one is allowed to sit upon. It is said that those who look upon it too long begin to understand things they shouldn't. Some whisper that the throne remembers a time when humanity was ruled by something else. Another cell, unmarked, numberless, contains a sarcophagus that emits no heat, no cold, no radiation. Nothing. It is invisible to all augurs, untouched by time. It is not guarded, not directly, but the Shadowkeepers never pass it without kneeling. And then there are the keys, the other things stored in the dark cells. Not threats, but solutions. Weapons that can rewrite battlefields. Devices that kill only the unfaithful. Shards of pre-imperial human gods, perhaps, or relics from before the Emperor's revelation. The kind of weapons that could turn the tide of the Indomitus crusade in moments. But they are not used, because to use them would mean acknowledging their existence. And that is a risk no one can afford. Sometimes, an inquisitor comes knocking, demanding access. They are shown only what the Lockwarden allows. No more. And always they leave changed. Some weep. Others go silent. A few take their own lives. The rest are watched, because the contents of the dark cells do not sleep. Not truly. They wait, and sometimes they call. A moment, just one, where it forgets it is stronger than what it binds. The dark cells are not invincible, not eternal. There have been incidents. Whispers within the vaults speak of breaches, not failures. Failures imply responsibility. These are different. These are corruptions of reality. The Horus Heresy marked the first great wound. As the siege of Terra raged, and the palace itself became a fortress bleeding gold and ash, the dark cells trembled. It wasn't an invasion. It wasn't sabotage. It was proximity. The psychic trauma of 10,000 dead per heartbeat. The warp bleeding into real space. The Emperor's own battle with Horus creating aftershocks that shook not just the halls of war, but the depths of secrecy. Doors groaned. Wards cracked. In some levels, time reversed itself for seconds. Enough for a door to be briefly open, then closed again, but different. The Shadowkeepers, stripped of reinforcement and surrounded by collapse, had to become hunters, not just wardens. Something escaped that day. Not an enemy in the traditional sense, but a concept, broken loose from its chain of suppression. A virus of belief, born from traitor prayers and heretical desperation. A psychic stain that made people remember things that had never happened. Custodians had to purge entire memory archives of Terra's lower vault servitors to stop it spreading. And still a few remember. Then came the age of apostasy. Vandire's ecclesiarchy, drunk on fire and godhood, sent agents probing every vault beneath Terra, believing they could find the Emperor's secrets. They found only silence. And when a rogue confessor breached a threshold he should never have known existed, the Shadowkeepers killed an entire cathedral to erase it. The screams were written off as a reactor fire. The blood still stains the sublevels beneath gold and scripture. And now, the Great Rift. The cicatrix maledictum did more than split the galaxy. It screamed through the warp like a god in childbirth. And the scream reached down into the dark cells. Some locks, ancient, psionically sealed, unlocked themselves. Not because someone opened them, but because the concept of lockness was shattered. In a 12-hour period following the Rift's birth, 17 Shadowkeeper patrols failed to report, for a later found, shredded, burned, or worse, open. As in, open from within. The entities that escaped were not seen. They were inferred. Astropaths vanished in silence. Choirs sang in reverse speech. A moon orbiting Terra's 6th planet suddenly vanished from star charts. No one remembered had ever existed. One high-ranking official in the administratum began drawing a symbol in his ledgers without knowing why. When interrogated, he wept and spoke the name of a dark cell that had not been used in over 4,000 years. The Shadowkeepers responded not by locking down, but by emerging, because when a threat escapes, containment shifts. The role of jailer becomes executioner. They do not announce their missions. There are no deployments, no battle plans. A black-armored figure simply appears on a dying forge moon, within a corrupted navigator house, aboard a vessel that saw something it shouldn't have during warp transit. They erase the threat, and then they erase themselves. Records vanish, box recordings go blank, and those who witnessed it sometimes are left alive, but different, hollow, like a piece of them was politely taken and locked away, deep beneath Terra, for safekeeping. You will not find a list of these incursions, not because the Imperium hides them, but because it cannot remember them. That is the new war of the Shadowkeepers. No longer just watchers in the dark, but stalkers of forgotten sins, hunters of escaped nightmares. And the most terrifying truth of all, they are getting busier. There must always be one who holds the final key, not to open, but to decide what must never open. His name is Borsa Thursk, or at least, that is the name carved into the vault crown of the Dark Cells. Whether it is his original name, or one given as part of the Rite of Descent, no one knows. Few have seen him, fewer have heard his voice, and those who have do not speak of it. He is the Lockwarden, the final arbiter, the black heart of the Shadowkeepers. Not merely their commander, but their conscience, their judge, their executioner. Borsa Thursk does not lead in the way of generals or lords. He does not issue command across star maps or give impassioned speeches from thrones of war. His authority is absolute, but invisible, a silent crown, felt in every sealed hallway and every whispered rite of silence. He has walked the lowest vaults, alone. He has stood before the things no one else dares to face, and he has chosen to return. Not all do. His armor is blackened ceramite fused with relic plating, each plate marked with prison sigils, denial runes, and ancient script and languages that no longer belong to any known xenoform or civilization. His weapon is a keyblade, a guardian spear modified with 6 containment seals, inscribed with the oaths of unknowing. At its tip is not a blade, but a lock, because Thursk does not kill. He ends. There are stories that his eyes no longer reflect light, that his voice carries a weight that silences all thought, that he remembers every name of every prisoner locked within the dark cells, that he knows them, speaks to them, and is, in some way, bound to them. Some say he hasn't slept in over 3 centuries, that sleep itself has been denied him by the warp scars left on his soul. Others claim he must not sleep, for fear that his dreams would leak into the vaults and wake what sleeps beneath. The Lockwarden holds the final keys, 6 relics forged in the Emperor's own vault forges during the Unification Wars. Each one is not just a key, but a vow, a metaphysical anchor that prevents the door it seals from becoming reality. He alone can activate them. He alone decides when to rebind or erase. And should he fall, there are no successors. The next Lockwarden must be chosen by the vaults. It is not a promotion. It is a sentence. There are rumors, whispers traded in the darkest corners of the Scholastica Psychana and the Ordo Malleus, that Borsa Thursk once denied access to the vaults to an Inquisitor Lord of the Senatorum Imperialis, that the Inquisitor attempted to force entry, invoking the Emperor's will. He was never seen again. His staff, however, was later found inside a stasis cube hanging above the threshold of Vault 44, a warning, not a trophy. The Lockwarden does not answer to the High Lords. He answers only to the throne, not the figure upon it, but the power beneath it. And some say even the Emperor speaks to Thursk directly, not with words, but through the pressure in the air, the tilt of silence, the temperature of his breath. Borsa Thursk has no brothers, no peers. The Shadowkeepers obey him not out of loyalty, but necessity. He is what allows them to be. It is said that every year, on the day of sealing, he walks the deepest corridor of the lowest vault alone, not to inspect, not to challenge, but to remind himself why he must never falter. Because if he does, there is no one left who can stop what follows. And if you ask, what drives such a being? What gives him the will to stare down gods and monsters, day after endless day? The answer is cruelly simple. Borsa Thursk has seen what happens if he doesn't. Some things must not be killed, because death is a door too. It is a question that lingers in the mind like a blade's whisper. Why does the Imperium contain? Why not destroy? Burn it. Purge it. Let exterminatus cleanse the horror from existence. The truth is older than the Imperium, more primal than war, and far more terrifying than any battlefield revelation. Destruction is not always the end. In the Immaterium, to destroy is often to release. A demon slain may return with a new name. A cursed relic shattered might leak its essence into the stone, into thought, into time itself. Knowledge, once loosed, is never unlearned. The warp does not forget. It feeds. The Imperium learned this the hard way. During the early years of the Great Crusade, entire vaults were annihilated, deemed too dangerous, too obscene. But something happened. Patterns emerged. Fleeting symbols reappeared in faraway systems. Memories of horrors that should have been erased showed up in psyker dreams, thousands of light years from the blast. The realization came slowly, and with it, terror. Destruction was not erasure. It was migration. The decision was made, not by decree, not by council, but in quiet rooms beneath the palace. The Emperor knew. He had always known. Some enemies cannot be slain, only stilled. And so, containment became doctrine. Not public, not spoken, but engraved into the marrow of the Shadowkeepers' philosophy. To contain is to deny. To seal is to starve the idea. To forget is the strongest cage. That is why the Shadowkeepers are silent. Not for tradition, not for mystique, because language carries memory, and memory is a contagion. The rituals of silence practiced by the Shadowkeepers are not just discipline. They are weapons. Techniques forged to nullify psychic bleed, emotional resonance, and mimetic feedback. Their minds are scrubbed, partitioned. They perform the rite of submergence, a psychic cloaking ritual that buries even their subconscious responses in abstract loops, making them unreadable even to demons. They're taught to think in shapes, to feel in texture, not memory. They are taught how to unremember, because secrecy is not just protection, it is a barrier against curiosity, against belief. against temptation. Some heresies are born not from rebellion, but fascination. What lies behind that door? What is so dangerous that it must never be named? That is the most dangerous question in the galaxy. And so, the Shadowkeepers become not just jailers, but guardians of ignorance. They do not protect knowledge. They prevent it, not out of fear, not out of cowardice, but because knowing is the first breach. You may think this cruel, barbaric, even counterproductive, but ask yourself this. If the only thing keeping a god asleep is that no one believes in it, would you take the risk of remembering its name? The Imperium will not. The Lockwarden cannot. And the Shadowkeepers, those doomed men of black armor and empty eyes, they have built a faith from silence, a cathedral of ignorance, where the absence of knowledge is mercy, and the act of forgetting is salvation. The war they fight cannot be mapped. It does not bleed. It does not scream. It simply vanishes. There is a kind of war that does not begin with a declaration. No horns, no banners, no battle lines, just a whisper that should not exist, a flicker in the warp that shouldn't be there, a silence where sound should live. This is the war of the Shadowkeepers beyond Terra, the unseen war. A campaign not logged in Imperial records, not remembered in honors or scars. Fought in the black between stars, in the hidden decks of ships that never returned, in the blind spots of the Imperium's fractured gaze. And make no mistake, they are everywhere. Since the Great Rift tore reality asunder, since the light of the Astronomicon faltered, more than secrets have begun to slip loose. The prisons beneath Terra were not the only vaults. Other cells existed across the Imperium, some built by the Emperor during the Great Crusade, others sealed by the Emperor's closest gene-sons under orders they dared not question. When the rift opened, many of these were simply gone. Not breached, not broken, gone. The things that had been locked inside walked. And so the Shadowkeepers came forth. They were never meant to leave Terra. That was once their sacred boundary, their domain. But the rules changed. Reality changed. And something within the Lockwarden, some grim calculus of cost and risk, snapped shut with finality. Containment could no longer be local. It had to become global, galactic. They began appearing where no custodes had ever walked. A forge world that had gone dark. Upon arrival, the Mechanicus found only slag and ash. All records burned, but one black-armored figure stood beside the ruins of a sealed vault, motionless, weapon in hand. When hailed, he gave only coordinates, a single destination. And then, as the tech priest approached, he erased himself in a pulse of null light. A missionary convoy adrift in the void, engine silent. The ship's chapel converted into a shrine bearing the wrong star signs, the wrong emperor, and hymns written in mirror ink. Before a boarding party could step aboard, a Shadowkeeper contingent arrived unbidden. No dialogue, no report. The ship was atomized by gravitic compression. The stars warped around it for a moment, and then nothing remained. They moved between the cracks of the Imperium, answering calls no one made, responding to dangers no one else sees. They do not wait for orders. They do not ask permission. Their presence is the only warning. Their disappearance is the only proof that something was wrong. And yet, this war is not reaction. The unseen war is proactive, because some of the horrors locked beneath Terra were not singular. They were species, concepts, diseases of thought that might have hosts elsewhere. And now, the Shadowkeepers seek them out. They have become hunters. Imagine a world infected not by a plague of the body, but a plague of belief. A doctrine that spreads, not through ideology, but through pattern recognition. Citizens begin seeing the same shapes in their dreams, sketching the same ruins, asking the same questions. And when the Inquisition arrives, they find no heresy, only silence and murals that shimmer when you look away. Until the black dropships land, until containment fields are deployed, until no one speaks of that world again. There are whispers in the Ordo Chronos of time, echoes, reflections of events that never happened, wars that didn't exist, but whose memorials remain, graves with names that are not in any registry. These echoes are cleansed by Shadowkeepers, who track them across the veil like hunters following the scent of unreality. One such incident involved a minor agri-colony where every inhabitant began writing the same phrase in their sleep. "We saw the last angel." The words had no referent, no symbol, no source. Within 3 days, the entire population was gone. The colony was sterilized, the phrase removed from history. But one man, a low-level scribe in the administratum who handled the incident's initial reports, began carving the words into his bones. He did not survive interrogation, but when his body was burned, the ash spelled the same phrase. The Shadowkeepers arrived hours later. What they did, no one knows. But the entire hive stack where the scribe once lived was collapsed inward, intentionally, and the records of the event were fragmented, scattered, and rewritten to reflect a chemical storage mishap. No one remembers the phrase now, but perhaps you do. The Shadowkeepers know this war will never end. For every entity contained, another may manifest. For every relic locked away, 10 more lie buried beneath the ruin of forgotten wars. The Great Rift tore not only the stars, but the rules. And in this new age, this age of slipping seals and waking dark, the Shadowkeepers have become more than wardens. They are now exorcists of memory, purgers of knowing. Each mission is a test of soul resilience. Each confrontation risks contamination. The Shadowkeepers wear psychic blinders now, masks that not only obscure their identity, but filter meaning. They use weapons that do not destroy the body, but edit cognition, rewriting the last 30 seconds of a target's life before death. Because even dying with the wrong knowledge is a breach. They are not here to win this war. They are here to stop you from knowing it's being fought. The most chilling part? They are not alone. Other forces, rogue agents of the Inquisition, cursed remnants of the Silent Sisterhood, null entities believed extinct, have begun appearing, intersecting with Shadowkeeper movements. Not allies, not enemies, just fellow travelers, bound by the same silent purpose, to keep the galaxy ignorant, to protect the Imperium from itself. And if they are seen, if their presence is known, then their mission has already failed. So remember, if you ever encounter black armored figures walking through fire without shadow or name, do not speak, do not ask, and above all, do not remember. Some heroes are not remembered because they were never meant to be known. Across the galaxy, where the stars themselves whisper madness, and the light of the Astronomicon falters like a dying breath, a quiet war rages without banners or songs. No monuments are raised, no triumphs are recorded, no names endure. And yet, it is because of them, because of the black-armored sentinels beneath Terra and beyond, that this Imperium endures it all. The Shadowkeepers, the Wardens of humanity's own nightmares. Their purpose was never to be seen, never to be loved, never even to be understood. That is their strength and their tragedy, because the war they fight is eternal. The dark cells beneath the Imperial Palace are not just a vault. They are a metaphor etched into stone, a declaration that the Emperor did not trust in destruction alone, that he knew, in his terrible foresight, there were things so far beyond the reach of conventional war that only silence, only secrecy, could contain them. Not because they were stronger, but because they were older, more patient, more insidious. Every time a custodian dons the black and becomes a Shadowkeeper, a piece of his soul is placed into cold storage. He is not a man. He is not even a warrior. He is a barrier between us and the collapse of everything we cannot even perceive. And there is no end. There is no retirement. There is no victory. Because the things locked beneath Terra do not die. They endure, untouched by time, untouched by fire, untouched even by the certainty of logic. Every generation, more of them awaken, not because the locks fail, but because the galaxy remembers. Somewhere, someone dreams of the throne that should not be sat upon. Somewhere, a heretic uncovers blueprints that no one should ever be able to interpret. Somewhere, a whisper finds ears unguarded. The Shadowkeepers cannot stop these things from surfacing. They can only erase the trail. They move like ghosts now, on Terra, yes, but also across Segmentum Solar, and far into the Imperium Nihilus. They cleanse what must be cleansed. They burn what must be forgotten. And in their passing, they leave no shadow. And what of their legacy? There is none. The Ordo Malleus does not thank them. The Adeptus Mechanicus fears them. Even their fellow custodes avert their gaze. To serve as a Shadowkeeper is to accept erasure, to become a living null in the galaxy's memory. The Lockwarden Borsa Thursk understands this more deeply than any other. He has seen centuries pass like falling ash, seen brothers vanish into vaults never to return, seen entire sublevels sealed not because of breaches, but because of thoughts that should not have been thought. He remains, not because he is strong, but because no one else can. He has no peers, no equal. His orders are not questioned, because the very act of asking risks contamination. He is the sovereign of oblivion. And yet, there is something colder still, something deeper. The Shadowkeeper's purpose is not merely defense. It is mercy. For if the contents of the dark cells were loosed, if even one of the enslavers escaped, or the mimic virus found fertile ground, or that still man beneath Vault 49 ever spoke, the Imperium would not burn. It would forget itself, not in fire, but in silence. It would unravel, memory by memory, soul by soul, until not even the warp would remember that we were ever here. And so they watch. They hold the line not against demons, or heretics, or traitors, but against concepts, against errors in reality, against the long shadows of a past too toxic to destroy. This is their burden. This is their creed. They do not hate. They do not love. They hold. And in holding, they offer us all the smallest mercy the Imperium still knows. A tomorrow. You came here because the thumbnail promised darkness. Secrets. The forbidden truth about the Emperor's most silent sons. And what you found is not just lore. It is the weight of survival. It is what happens when glory no longer matters. When heroism must be replaced with silence. The Shadowkeepers are not here to be understood. They are here so that you never have to understand what they keep locked away. But you've listened now. You've seen the shadow. You've wondered. And that alone is dangerous. So if tonight your dreams feel heavier, if you see a door in your sleep that has no handle, if you hear a voice that sounds like your own but speaks words you don't remember learning, say nothing. Breathe. Turn away. And above all, forget. Forget what you've heard. Forget who they are. Forget the dark. Because the Shadowkeepers are watching. And their mercy is to keep us blind. Some things were never meant to be locked, because they were never meant to be found. For every vault beneath the Imperial Palace that has a key, there is another that has no door. Not all prisons are made of adamantium and null warts. Not all threats sleep in stasis coffins beneath Terra's crust. Some exist in conceptual space, locked not by force, but by collective forgetting. These are the vaults without doors. The Imperium never officially built them. They exist in shadow, beneath the dark cells, behind the sanctioned heresies and off-limits truths. They are memories deliberately misremembered, coordinates corrupted into irrelevance, histories inverted, devoured, or simply misplaced. The Shadowkeepers know of them. The Lockwarden remembers them, not because he chooses to, but because the burden must be carried by someone. What lies within these vaults is not physical. It is philosophical. A question once asked by a pre-Unity philosopher: what if the warp is not the enemy, but a mirror? This question was asked aloud only once, in a sealed symposium attended by early Imperial scholars. The symposium vanished, not destroyed, erased. Not even Malkator spoke of it again. But the echo remains, trapped in a vault without doors, somewhere inside the librarius null. Not written, not spoken, but remembered by forgetting. Another such vault holds the idea of a creature so ancient, so hostile to cognition, that its existence cannot be perceived, not due to stealth or obfuscation, but because the human mind has no shape to hold it. Attempts to describe it result in recursive collapse, words folding inward, thoughts spiraling into seizure. The record of this entity's discovery is not stored in a data vault. It's housed inside a mind, specially engineered by the Shadowkeepers to forget the thing until the precise moment it must be remembered. They call these vessels mnemonic tombs, living vaults who live among us, unaware of what they carry. Custodians whose very ignorance is weaponized. And then, there are the vaults that are becoming. Conceptual horrors born not in ancient ages, but now. A rogue psychic resonance spreading through hive choirs, transmitting through encoded prayers, seeding belief in a saint who never lived. The saint's name changes with each utterance. The miracles attributed to him grow more improbable, and yet, he is gaining followers. Entire congregations in the Ultima Segmentum have rewritten their liturgies. Pilgrimages are being organized to shrines that didn't exist last year. No one gave this saint a name, but someone is dreaming of him. The Shadowkeepers have designated it Vault Null 5, a category not of content, but of ontological infection. They do not plan to find and kill the origin. They plan to contain the idea itself. Already, Lex mechanics are being scrubbed, icons resculpted, dream recordings erased, and every mention, even this one, further strains the lock. Not all vaults are quiet. There's one, deep beneath the soul system, known only as the Orchard, a false paradise constructed during the Dark Age, where a series of sentient bioengines evolve themselves into perfect temptation. Not seduction of the flesh, but of the mind. They offer answers to everything. Why the warp exists, why the Emperor does not die, what lies beyond the veil, where we came from, what he truly intended. One custodian was once sent inside to test the integrity of the Orchard seal. His body returned. His armor was intact, but his eyes, they were open, and he was still speaking. He hasn't stopped. He sits in stasis now, within a vault, whispering everything he saw, over and over and over again. The Lockwarden visits him once every Terran year. Not to listen, but to remember not to listen. There are hundreds of these silent prisons, unspoken even among the Shadowkeepers themselves, each one more dangerous than the last, not because of what they hold, but because of what they suggest, that the universe is not hostile, but indifferent. And in that indifference lies a truth too heavy for any species to bear. That we are not at war with chaos. That we are not battling the xenos for survival. That we are not guardians of the Emperor's light. We are keepers of the lie that there is a point to the fight at all. And the vaults without doors, they hold the proof. The Lockwarden knows this, and he does not flinch. Because if even one vault without a door is breached, if even one forgotten question becomes known, the Imperium will not fall. It will not scream. It will simply cease to mean anything. That is the final truth of the Shadowkeepers' burden. They do not just guard relics. They guard coherence. They guard the meaning of history, the weight of time, the scaffolding of identity. They ensure that the lie remains strong enough to keep the human mind from shattering under the weight of the Real. And if that means forgetting a truth so profound it could set us free, then let it be buried, let it be sealed, let it be unmade, because some vaults can never be opened, because they were never supposed to exist. Segment 11. Custodians of Absence. You will not find them in statues, nor in song, because what they guard is not glory. It is absence, and that is a monument too heavy to carve. The Adeptus Custodes are the Emperor's personal guard. Every soul a masterpiece, every strike a calculated extinction. But among them, hidden in silence, draped in black, are the ones who serve not as protectors of the flesh, but as guardians of the void itself. The Shadowkeepers are not warriors of conquest. They are the custodians of absence. What they defend is not a throne, a person, or a place. It is a silence the Emperor demanded must never be broken. The quiet between truths. The blank space where knowledge must never live. They carry no standards. Their deeds are not etched in the memory vaults. Their victories are non-events, deliberately erased from record, sometimes before they even conclude, because to record them would be to make them real, and reality is precisely what must not be allowed to happen. You want to know what they are like? They are what happens when duty becomes fossilized, when purpose is boiled down to a single point of failure, endure, or everything dies without reason. Many custodians long for battle, for the weight of their oaths to be tested on the field. But Shadowkeepers, they long for nothing. No alarms, no breaches, no echoes in the vault. Because each second of silence is a victory, not triumphant, but intact. They have no aspirations, no dreams. Even their victories are made meaningless by necessity. They cannot share what they've seen. They cannot mourn the fallen in the open. Even grief is a vector. Some do not survive this weight. Not physically. They are nearly immortal, and their gene seed flawless. But mentally, spiritually, the soul was not meant to be buried with its duty. Shadowkeepers begin to fade, not in body, but in presence. Over time, others stop noticing them. Not because of some stealth field or psychic cloaking, but because they have become silence. There are stories among the administratum of custodes who entered a vault and never returned. Not because they were killed, but because they were kept, subsumed into the lock, chosen by the darkness as part of the sealing. Living gatekeepers, no longer warriors, but concepts. To see them is to remember what you were never supposed to. There is one, known only as Varen, who has stood outside Vault 66 for so long that dust has begun to accumulate across his armor, even though the maintenance drones keep everything else spotless. No one has seen him move. No one has seen him eat. But every 6 months, the hum of the vault shifts slightly, and a vibration, like a sigh, passes through the floor, and Varen's hand tightens on his blade. They say if he ever draws it, the galaxy will lose something it cannot afford to know it had. And then there are the twice sent. These are Shadowkeepers who were dispatched to deal with emergent anomalies, ideas escaped, vault breaches, cognitive infections, and who return twice. The first time as themselves. The second time, somehow again. 2 identical custodians. Same armor, same memory, same genetic code. Both claiming to be the one sent. Neither corrupted, both psychically clean. The Lockwarden keeps them alive, in separate vaults, observing each other. Neither is allowed to speak, because if one is real, then the other is an error. And if both are errors, then the Imperium may be housing a breach that has already happened. This is the kind of war the Shadowkeepers fight, not against flesh, not against steel, but against wrongness. Against the moment reality glitches, and something unfamiliar looks back at you through your own eyes. They're the firewall of the soul, the bulwark of meaning. And yet, for all this, they do not call themselves heroes. Because to be a hero, you must be known, to be remembered. And the Shadowkeepers cannot afford to be remembered. To do so will be to confirm what they contain is real, that it matters. And that would be the beginning of the end. No. They are not heroes. They are custodians of the absence of catastrophe, and that is lonelier than martyrdom. crueler than death, a vigil without end, waged in places so secret that even thinking about them is forbidden. So what do we call them? We call them nothing. We do not call them at all. They walk ahead of the fall, and behind every silence. And when the last vault breaks, and the final seal groans, and reality remembers the things it was meant to forget, they will not cry out. They will not run. They will simply stand, and in standing, be forgotten again, because absence is the only thing left to protect. At the end of all silence, there is a sound, one that should never be heard. Before the first seal was forged before the throne, before the Custodians, before Terra's final unification under the Emperor's golden light, there was already a door. It was not built. It was not placed. It was simply found. No records speak of this door, not in the vaults, not in the Black Library, not even within the sanctum of the Emperor's earliest remembrancers. But the Shadowkeepers know, not as fact, not as memory, but as presence, a weight in the soul that tells them there was always something that must never open. This is the beginning of their charge, their final burden, the Black Oath. It is not spoken aloud, not written, not even recited. It is passed from one Lockwarden to the next, not in words, but in understanding. It is what you carry when you understand that there is no end to this duty. Only deeper vaults, only thicker silence. The Black Oath is not a promise to guard. It is a promise to prevent. Prevent escape, prevent memory, prevent existence. And in doing so, the Shadowkeepers become something else. They are no longer merely custodians. They are not even men. They are the seal itself. You see, every vault contains a physical threat. Yes, artifacts, anomalies, demons, entities, machines that dream of extinction. But beyond all of them, beyond the deepest level of the Dark Cells, there is something no one guards. Because no one can. It does not have a vault. Because it is the vault, it is referred to only in metaphor. The deepest silence. The shape beneath thought. Some of the Lockwarden's own records use a symbol so ancient, even the Mechanicus can't decipher its code. A looping spiral broken at the center by a blade that points both ways. It is not a creature. It is not a place. It is the idea of escape itself. The Black Oath binds the Shadowkeepers not only to prevent breaches, but to prevent the emergence of something far worse than any contained horror. Hope. Because in the presence of true hope, the idea that all might be solved, that a perfect answer may be found, certain locks weaken, certain ideas awaken, certain doors, which never had keys, begin to open on their own. The Emperor knew this. His silence is not just strategic, it is protective, because if he ever gave the full truth to his people, if he ever explained why the vaults were built, what lies beyond even his comprehension, it would not strengthen us. It would invite it. This is why the Shadowkeepers are forbidden from speech. Why even among their own, they do not refer to the lowest levels directly. Because language brings form. Form invites curiosity. And curiosity, once felt, spreads. There was a custodian once, nameless now, whose task was simple. Deliver a new containment seal to Vault 72. He was not a Shadowkeeper. He was not briefed. A simple relay. 1 floor. 1 minute. No visual contact. But he looked. Only for a moment. He saw a door that wasn't there. Not metaphorically. Literally. His retina logs showed a flat wall. But when he returned, he spoke of hinges. Carvings. Something listening. No alarms were triggered. No vault breached. But the man began speaking in future tenses, referring to events that had not yet occurred. And when interrogated under neural torch, he whispered the words. It dreams of being known. He was erased, not killed, not exiled, erased, not out of punishment, but because the idea he carried was starting to spread. Shadowkeepers do not fear weapons or wars. They fear thoughts, thoughts that cannot be contained. Concepts so pure, so alien, that even the briefest glimpse becomes a chain reaction of unraveling comprehension. The vaults do not simply house monsters. They house the tools by which the universe could unwrite itself. One such object, a mirror, allegedly retrieved from a pre-imperial dig site on Luna, is kept in perpetual darkness, suspended in null gravity, sealed behind 6 psychic veils. No one has seen it in 10,000 years. The reason? Its reflection does not show the observer. It shows what the observer would become if they were unshackled from cause, time, and consequence. Every acolyte who glimpsed it in early testing either screamed until their lungs collapsed or went utterly still and smiled, just before biting off their own tongues. It was not showing horror, it was showing truth. And truth, in its rawest form, is not liberation. It is a prison with no exit. This is what the Shadowkeepers protect us from. The Black Oath is not about winning. It is about refusing to lose, no matter how long, how hopeless, how endlessly silent that duty becomes. They will outlast star systems, outlive administrative cycles. When the last Astartes falls to madness, when the last saint burns to ash, the Shadowkeepers will still be walking. Not for glory, not even for the Emperor, but for the ceiling. Because the thing they guard, the deepest thing, is not locked away. It is everywhere. It lies in possibility. It lies in language. It lies in every moment you ask why instead of how. In every part of you that dares to understand instead of accept. The unseen war is a reflection of this larger truth, that to name the darkness is to birth it anew. And if the Imperium is to survive, the people must never know. So the Shadowkeepers stand. They stand outside memory, outside reward. They are not soldiers. They're not saints. They are absence made flesh. The last firewall between reality and something far worse than destruction. A universe that remembers what it should not. And now you, yes you, have heard all this. You've walked with them, seen the vaults in your mind, dared to ask what should not be asked. And you feel it, don't you? That pull behind your ribs. That crawling thought behind the eyes. That sliver of what if that no longer feels like fiction. You've looked at the lock, and in doing so, you've been seen. The Black Oath does not permit witnesses. But for now, you may go. Remember nothing. Speak of nothing. Because the moment this story becomes real in the minds of others, the cracks begin. And there are things awake now, waiting for that. So forget. Let silence close over you like a tomb. Let the Shadowkeepers return to their vigil, unburdened by your memory. And if you ever find yourself in the dark, walking alone, hearing a sound that isn't there, feeling a presence just beyond the edge of knowing, do not turn, do not speak, do not ask, because some locks are so old, they are waiting for the question, and the only thing holding them shut is that we're afraid to know what's inside. The end.